All right, guys, I run 87 octane fuel in my 7.3 gas, and I always do, and I always will. I run 87 octane fuel in my 3.5 EcoBoost Expedition Max, and I always will. See, it's right there in theory, but my fiance has it to go to her dress fitting for us getting married. She's got to try on her wedding dress, and of course, I can't be there. So we're going to pretend that the Expedition is here in support, and we're going to have a talk about gasoline octane and what it means to you and what the real impacts of running different fuel is and why you'd want to run different fuel. We'll talk about that right now. So I'm sure none of you guys want to do anything that is negative to your vehicle's long-term durability. And a lot of times when people don't know any better, they think that running premium all the time is like the name premium. It makes you think it's just better. Well, we're going to have a conversation about what really is better. And in order to have that conversation, we need to go back in time a little bit. Gasoline used to be 100% gasoline. Now, as I'm standing in my field, and I don't want to talk too much crap about the corn lobby, but we can thank the corn lobby for wanting to increase the value of corn by having ethanol fuel be part of our fuel diet for our vehicles. Alcohol has its downsides. Alcohol has its plus sides. You could make an argument that ethanol is a cheap way to have a high octane fuel. It also means that your vehicle is going to burn more fuel because there's less heat energy in a given volume of ethanol. So the more ethanol you put in the fuel, the less volatile or the less power the fuel has per given volume. Also, the stoichiometric ratio is different for ethanol than it is for gasoline. So when you mix the two, you need to make sure that you have the right, or the right mix ratio, because that's going to determine the stoichiometric ratio. And I'm sure many of you remember in chemistry class, that is how much fuel we need to have for the given air. Whether you're burning paper and air, or propane and air, or natural gas and air, or whatever you're burning and air, wood and air, let's say, or gasoline and air, depends on how much fuel quantity you need to have for a given amount of oxygen. When we went to E10, which is 10% ethanol, that became the standard laws probably in 05, 06, 07. When that started to be a thing, it took a while for that to kind of catch on and be in all of our gas tanks. When that became a thing all over the country, a lot of vehicles were still being built, tuned for E0. My Excursion was tuned for E0 in 2004. My buddy's parents' 2001 Chevy half-ton, tuned for E0, 14.7 to 1 stoichiometric ratio. Their 99 that I tuned, 14.7. My buddy's other 99, again, 14.7. Their 2005 6.0 that has been running on my tune now for, I think it's probably got 60,000 miles on it on the tune in probably 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It's been a long time. Again, that truck in 2005 was also tuned for 14.7 to 1 stoichiometric ratio. I looked at a tune for a 2007 6.0, 14.7 to 1. Don't ask me why, it was 14.7 to 1. It is a very easy change you can make when you're tuning. And I want to interject something really quick. This channel has grown, and there's lots of facets of my life that I haven't included on the channel. And one of them is an interest in tuning and making trucks fast, more powerful, and whatever. And we would have that if I wouldn't have taken apart my 2002 6.0, simply because I wanted to make it go faster, heads cam, intake, built bottom end, because I'm stupid, okay? That truck hasn't been on the channel because it's still been taken apart because I haven't had time to work on it. If you guys want to see LS tuning, potentially maybe mud drags, sand drags, playing off-road with tuned trucks, looking at how we can use tuning to improve the performance of vehicles, one thing we all talked about was what if we were to put a 5.3 or 6.0 in a fishing boat, and then could have different tunes using the gear position selector for different rev limits and amount of torque produced at idle to impact trolling speed. There's all kinds of things that we've talked about, and we've just never done it. As well as I've always wanted to put a transmission behind an engine in a powerboat and see what happened, like a 2-speed power glide. I always thought it'd be really interesting. So there's lots of things that we've talked about doing over the years, my buddies and I, all of our crazy ideas. And we didn't film any of them, and some of them we didn't do, some of them we did, and again, we didn't film them. manual swaps and engine swaps and all kinds of craziness. Put a 5.3 in a 2001 6.0 and tuned the crap out of it. The truck was really powerful. It was a cool truck. Engine ended up tossing a couple of rods out at about at 350,000 miles after the rod bearing seized up, which is usually what kills an LS is rod bearings. They're usually the first thing to go unless they have a fuel pump, or excuse me, unless they have a oil pump failure. Anyway, I have a lot of background in working on LS engines, doing swaps, tuning swaps, that kind of thing. If you guys want to see some older truck content, perhaps a 454 Vortec, that's something that I really want to revisit. My buddy had a 00 454 Vortec, and he found the limit of the bottom end when he ran like miles at full throttle, ended up pumping all the oil into the heads, and because it's only a 6-quart tank or 6-quart oil pan in a truck, he ended up burning out the motor and sending a bunch of rods through the bottom end because he held it wide too long. It's something I've always wanted to revisit, and starting with cutting the oil pan apart and putting at least an extra 2 quarts of oil in the pan, if not 4, by putting wings on the pan, taking a truck pan and just making more oil capacity for it. Things that we've learned along the way of craziness that I haven't had on my YouTube channel because it's been years since we've done any of this stuff. If you guys want to see craziness like that, let me know, because I think it's time to start investing in the YouTube channel in terms of having some entertainment content that's also educational, find the limits of things, and learn from our mistakes, share our mistakes, all that good stuff. I've been kind of focusing on property work, food plotting, tractor use, tree work, and towing and new truck and things like that. It's a big part of my life that I haven't put on YouTube yet. And perhaps we should. So let me know down below if you guys want to see any of that. Like I said, tuning, modifying trucks, off-roading trucks, all that kind of stuff. I'm trying to decide how I want to attack the growth of the channel and get some new diversified content out there that is both entertaining and I would prefer it to be highly educational, because I like when entertainment goes hand in hand with education. Anyway, so speaking about fuel, going back to fuel, all the fuel these days is E10, unless you live in some state that is E15, God forbid. If you still have a vehicle, like you're still driving a 90s Chevy, a TBI, a Vortec, a older Ford, fuel injection, 5.4, V10, all those things are all tuned for 2-valve V10, 2-valve 5.4. They were all tuned for fuel you can't buy anymore. They're inherently lean. The O2 sensors do not correct for that. They're still looking at the ideal stoichiometric ratio to find or to adjust the fuel trims. So simply inputting the correct, if you just took a blank 6.0 or a 5.3, I'll just say, you open up your HP tuners, you take down you pull the file, you save a new one, you make one modification, you change it to 14.23 to 1, and you go drive your truck. All of the power that you thought you lost over time is gained back with one keystroke. That's as simple as it has to be. It's a $200, it's $105 of credits, I think it is right now, currently. And then, of course, you'd have to have HP tuners. Someone locally to you for sure does it. You can immediately get all the power back that you think you lost because of time. I've heard people say so much, I have this 01, 02, 03, 04, 99, whatever, Chevy, 5360. And it just feels like it's lost some power over time. It's still a good truck, runs okay, doesn't burn any oil, but it just feels a little slower. That is just fuel, guys. Caveat really quick. You could also have a bad fuel pump or a stunk or a clogged up fuel filter. Your rail, we'll talk more about that in just a second. Your rail is going to end up running dry or low on pressure. Your injectors are dumb. We'll just talk about it right now. Injectors on these, they're not direct injection injectors. Multi-port injectors are dumb. They open and close for a given period of time, and the tune tells it when to open and close. When the O2 sensors feel that they're not seeing the right amount of O2 or lack of O2 in the exhaust, they change your long-term and short-term fuel trims to compensate for that. They can only peg out so much of your long-term fuel trims to make up for a bad fuel pump, which is what's going to do is make it so that the duration of the fuel pulse is longer. If you have the wrong amount of volume is defined by pressure. If you have the wrong amount of pressure in your rail, you're not going to squirt the same amount of fuel in a given period of time. Then there's going to be a point where the long-term fuel trims can't compensate for a bad fuel pump. What they commonly do on Chevy trucks is the fuel pump will lose efficiency over time. And the same thing will happen if you have a stuck fuel filter, is that it'll get stucker, more stuck. I don't know if stucker is a word, more stuck. And you will steadily lose engine horsepower because you run out of fuel. A lot of times you'll find that your truck feels stout at, say, quarter throttle, runs really good, and then when you step on it, it just kind of falls on its face. That's lack of fuel. So you could have perfect ignition timing. If you don't have the right amount of fuel volume in your fuel rails all the time, you're going to run out of fuel in those rails, and your injectors are going to be open with no fuel coming out of them, or little fuel coming out of them, just enough to maybe keep the truck running. Eventually, as the fuel pump fails over time, you're going to find more and more degradation to performance, and also misfires. You're going to start throwing P300 code, and then once you get to that point, you're already on the line of your fuel pump's probably going to fail in less than 100 miles, and it's going to steadily decline in your truck's drivability to the point where the truck can't even idle. So that's kind of the long-term failure mode of the truck. A good indication is you've lost power. There's no other good reason for it. You should be checking that. Fuel filter, fuel lines for a kink in line, or a bad fuel pump. Very common on an old Chevy. Very common on an old Ford too. But they'll run a really long time. They'll get you there with a bad fuel pump. So keep that in mind. If you have something that's kind of weak, just feels lame, check your fuel pump. Check it under load. It's not about idle that matters. The truck needs to be driven with the gauge on the windshield pointing at you, or unless you can data log it. If you have a newer vehicle, you data log it. But you need to be checking that fuel pressure under load, and when you get on it, you can't be having that gauge, because I promise you that's the problem. When that gauge goes, you got problems. So anyway, let's get back to talking about fuel, okay? These older vehicles that have not been tuned yet, they have this problem where they're lean all the time. Now, let me back up a little bit. They're lean already all the time. A Ford V10 is notoriously a very lean-tuned engine for emissions reasons. The 2V V10 is not exactly the most efficient emissions-creating machine that's ever been created. Ford already knew they were not very good on emissions, and they were already lean to start with. It also keeps the cat hot by the engine being lean. And that's a problem. The cat cooling down impacts the emissions of the vehicle. Unless they have a secondary fuel injector, they're controlling cat temperature. Lean is hot. You put extra fuel in that doesn't get burned by the engine. The rich mixture goes in the cat, cools the cat down. It is not that more fuel makes it hotter. On a diesel, that's the case. On a gas engine, being rich makes it colder, and it'll make the cat stop glowing, stop doing its job, and then you have higher emissions. So it's a balancing act on these engines, not only giving you the performance you desire, but then the emissions that they want you to have. So let's just say you have a truck, hasn't been tuned, it's all stock, and someone tells you, I put 93 in my truck, and my truck runs better. It doesn't spark knock, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. And it doesn't really make any sense, because you're like, well, the manufacturer said that it should take 87. Why can't I run 87? What is going on is you're giving it a little bit better octane, prevents pre-ignition. The engine is pulling less timing out. You'll make more power on the same amount of fuel. You're lean, but you have better fuel or higher octane fuel, and therefore you might feel that you have a little bit better power production. Maybe you might feel that. You also might think that you get better fuel economy, because you might. Every vehicle I've ever tuned has gotten better fuel economy, or every gas engine that I've ever tuned has gotten better fuel economy after I tuned it. The more efficiently you produce torque with a given amount of fuel, the farther you go on that amount of fuel. It's that simple. There is diminishing returns. You get into big cams that waste a lot of energy. You're going to have very much diminishing returns there. If you change the heads to the point where you're making no torque down low, and therefore you're going to spend a lot of RPM to make the torque, again, you're not going to benefit fuel economy that way. But if you take a stock engine and you tune it, generally speaking, you're going to get better fuel economy, because you're increasing the torque produced for the same amount of fuel that's going in the motor. So you'll have people tell you that running 93 improved fuel economy and improved power. And on a vehicle tuned for E0, that very well could be the case. A better thing to do would be to have a custom tune put on your vehicle. The Fords use SCT. HP Tuners does not tune older Ford ECUs. Many different Mustang-related tuning companies, people who are working on SN95, 4.6, and 5.4 earlier Mustangs. If they're capable of doing that, they can tune your 5.4 truck or your V10. And you should definitely look at getting a custom tune done for your vehicle. If you have an LS, probably not half the people, it's kind of a joke, but a couple people in your county probably tune LSs. And one of them is probably a professional at it or something like that. Find out who that is, have your truck or car tuned. You're going to be amazed at how much power and potential fuel economy increase you're going to have with a good tune put onto your truck. And drivability improvement when the transmission gets tuned. So, we've talked a little bit about the older ones. Potentially, 93 could improve drivability, remove the spark knock, and improve fuel economy. It is not because the fuel is 93, it's because the engine is lean. 93 has actually less, higher octane has less energy for a given volume than 87, so 87 is more powerful than 93 per given volume. It's a really small number. It's almost doesn't need to be talked about, but it's true. The other thing is premium fuel doesn't mean that it's better. It just means that it's more refined. It has less lights in it that are more volatile, and therefore it lights off less easy. It isn't inherently cleaner. It doesn't inherently burn better. All of that is total falsity. It could be the opposite. How many people do you know that run 87 versus 93? Probably the vast majority of people you know have a car that they run 87 in. The frequency that fuel gets changed at the gas pump is huge compared to the 93. The amount of people running 93 are hugely smaller. It's likely that 93, it's produced in less volume, but it's being burned less often. It's probably been sitting around longer. It's been sitting in the tank at your gas station longer. It probably isn't as clean or as good or as fresh a fuel as 87. So if you don't need 93, you need to not run 93 or mid-grade or whatever. If you run a Dodge, usually they recommend 89. Just do what they say because that's what they tune the truck for. Run 89. The downside of mid-grade, same thing. It's probably used even less than 93. How many people are buying mid-grade? I know no one unless they own a Dodge that uses mid-grade. Usually mid-grade would be 89 or 91. Rarely do people ever buy that. That fuel is probably the worst quality fuel that you're going to get at any pump, in my opinion. It probably contributes to a lot of the reason why people who own Hemis tend to have a lot of spark knock. Number one, the Hemi head the semi-Hemi head is a very poor head design. Hemis are not very efficient. They're able to make a lot of power in certain applications. Let's not talk about Hemis. Not a big fan of the 5.7 or the 6.4 Hemi. But they do tend to have a lot of spark knock issues. They don't have a lot of quench surface, so they have a lot of pre-ignition tendencies. That's why they have dual spark plugs, to try and better control the ignition profile of that charge inside of the engine. So, run what your company says to run. In Ford's case, they say run 87. This engine is tuned to run E10. So I'm going to gain nothing by running 93 in this truck. And I don't recommend you do, because you're going to pay $1.80 more per gallon than 87. And you're going to gain nothing from it. The fuel has less volatility or less heat energy per volume. You're better off running 87. A caveat to that. Someone is going to say, well, when I run my local 87, the truck runs worse, gets worse fuel economy. It's probably because that gas station that you're using probably is your cheapest station, and it's probably buying junk old fuel. 87 isn't the problem in that situation. It's junk old fuel. They're buying the bottom basement garbage fuel, and you're feeling the repercussions. A lot of small town gas stations are like that. They buy the cheapest possible fuel. You may have 87 that doesn't run as good as 93 in your truck, probably because the 87 isn't actually 87. It's either dirty, has water in it, it's no good, or its octane rating isn't quite 87, it's not good fuel. Change up your station and try something else, because all the rest of us are running 87 with excellent fuel economy, with good power and all that good stuff. Just because you have boost does not mean you need to run high octane fuel. For instance, Ford spent a lot of time making the EcoBoost able to run, like my 3.5 EcoBoost in the Expedition is recommended to run 87. First of all, it has direct injection and multi-port injection. That combination helps heavily prevent LSPI, low-speed pre-ignition, and pre-ignition in all cases. The other thing is, when they adequately design the combustion chamber, it helps prevent pre-ignition too. Having proper airflow coming in and out of the engine helps prevent pre-ignition. Keeping the engine colder where the exhaust valve isn't glowing red hot helps prevent pre-ignition. Having cold intake charge temps because your intercooler is working properly helps prevent pre-ignition. Ford spent a lot of time making their engines be able to meet the horsepower rating that the vehicle has been prescribed with the fuel that they say that you can run. Can you run lower octane fuel in a vehicle made to run higher octane fuel? My question to you is your vehicle carbureted or aftermarket built where it's tuned for 93 and it's maxed out? When you're tuning an engine, you have choices. You could go and find that ragged limit of timing and of leaning it out to the point where you make absolutely the best peak power in the best conditions. Or you could be like they're tuned in a factory where they have very conservative and safe tuning. Let's just say you had a performance vehicle that was made by the OEM, said to be 93 octane. Take my dad Shelby, for instance, 5.4 supercharged dual overhead cam, obviously V8 mod motor. It is prescribed to run 93. If you had to put 87 in it, please stay out of boost. Please drive it easy. The knock sensors will pull timing out of the engine to prevent catastrophic damage. If you have an aftermarket tuned engine or a carbureted engine or aftermarket DFI or whatever that doesn't have knock sensors, because sometimes a big cam can screw up the knock sensors, or if you have the knock sensors turned off, you're not going to be able to pull the timing out of it, and you could get into a condition where even at part throttle, you could crack a piston, break a ring land, break a ring, cause too much piston heat, which causes the piston to break. That's really what kills the piston. What really happens when you have knock, okay? There's a layer of superheated gas on top of the piston, and it literally insulates the piston, much like, have you guys ever heard of people able to walk on hot coals? Well, they walk on the cool part of the coals because the wood is actually a phenomenal insulator. The black part of the wood coal is cold compared to the red or the gray part of the wood coal. It's kind of a campfire trick. That hot gas is excellent at insulating the top of the piston. The hot gases that are above it, the combustion gases, are hotter than the melting point of aluminum. And all of you are probably asking, well, how in the world do aluminum pistons not fail all the time or melt? It's because that hot layer of superheated gas on top of the piston protects the piston from the even hotter gas in the combustion chamber. When you have knock, it comes in and it blows all that stuff away. The little pre-ignition, pew, 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 and it blows all that superheated plasma away from the top of the piston, and you melt the piston. It happens really, really fast. So you don't want to have knock. OEM vehicles are tuned in such a way that, number one, they have enough room to pull the timing out. There's a maximum amount of timing that can be pulled. If you're on the ragged edge on 93 and it only can pull, say, 7 degrees out or 12 degrees out or whatever for knock retard, you're not going to pull enough timing out. You could break a piston. So keep that in the back of your mind. If you have a custom modified vehicle, you may want to really be careful about running the wrong or too low of octane fuel. If you have an OEM vehicle, let's just say you have a Hellcat powered Ram TRX, and I'm sure that that's asking for 93. If you're in, the middle of Ohio, in the middle of nowhere, coming back from a road trip with your family, as long as you're not towing a big camper or a big trailer, if you're towing like a single axle, 4-wheeler trailer, ski boat, little stuff, piddly stuff. Ski boat's kind of heavy. Aluminum boat, little boat, small stuff. You could definitely get away with running 87 just to get yourself home. Do not go full throttle. Be very gentle on the throttle. Keep in the back of your mind that you're the one protecting your piston from knock. You can definitely get away with that. The nice thing that I prefer, my Power Wagon recommended to run 89 if I'm not mistaken. It's more expensive. It's probably the least used fuel at the pump. It wasn't my favorite thing to do. I would commonly, especially when the 93 price was, within 10 or 12 cents, I just run 93 from mid-grade, because to me, I'd rather have the extra knock prevention, because I don't trust that the 89 was actually 89 because it's probably old, because nobody buys it. I would commonly run premium in the Power Wagon only because a lot of times I found that truck had spark knock on mid-grade like they said to run. So just because the sticker says 87, 89, 93, 91, whatever it is, you got to keep in mind that if you're noticing in your vehicle that your vehicle isn't responding the way you think it should, you should keep in the back of your mind that you definitely don't want to go full throttle. You could easily get a bad load of 93 and you could have knock, spark knock, pre-ignition. You could hear your engine being unhappy. Don't test out the limits of your motor by holding it full throttle. Just because you should be able to do it doesn't mean you should. So use your own head, be your own protector of your vehicle, and that will get you a long way. So I hope that I kind of covered 87 or running your OEM recommended fuel, even if your mind, you think that it should be, I've literally heard people say, I've always been told, or I just believe that if you have boost, you should always run premium. If the engine wasn't tuned for that, like the 3.5 EcoBoost from the factory, You don't need to run premium, and you should save yourself a bunch of money and just run 87 because you might get better fuel economy on the 87 anyway. But if you're having pre-ignition issues, you should take that into account and say, am I getting bad fuel? Should I definitely keep my foot out of it and we get through the situation? For instance, my Cummins had a load of bad diesel one time. And I had a tune in it with a lot of timing. And the truck wouldn't idle without... It was running very poorly. So I went and got a white bottle of diesel 911 with a cetane booster, dumped the whole damn bottle in, and let the truck idle for a while. It eventually smoothed out to the point where it ran okay, and I had already turned the tune down. So in the time I went and got that, I also put the stock tune back on. And that took all the timing out of the engine and the extra fuel duration. And then I just burned that tank of fuel out of the truck. Never had a problem since. I probably put 80,000 miles on the truck since that happened. Maybe 90, I don't know. It's been a long time. It's been a lot of years. So one time I've ever gotten bad fuel in diesel. If you would have driven your truck running like that, you probably would have broken a piston, especially with a lot of timing that truck had in it because of the tune and because of the power output of the tune, which was about double what the truck would make stock. So you're talking a lot of added stress onto the piston, the rings, the wrist pin, the rods, a lot of extra stress. Avoid that. If you hear something's wrong, it probably is wrong. It kind of goes without saying, make sure you don't put gas in diesel, make sure you don't put diesel in gas. So, I mean, you should know that, but if you ever get cross-contamination like that, and it's on a modern vehicle, you should stop, have your truck towed, bring it to the dealer, and have everything sucked out of it, unless you want to suck it out yourself, change your fuel filter. It's a big problem. Please don't put diesel in a gas, and please don't put gas in a diesel. It's very bad. So, hopefully that conversation made a lot of sense to you all. I see it come up all the time. Should I run this or that? Oh, one other thing. Compression or static compression has almost nothing to do with what octane you should run. There are, take the LS7, isn't it like 11.7 static compression ratio? In order to run on pump gas, the engine needs to be between 8 and 9, approximately, dynamic compression ratio. So, an LQ4, for instance, that gets ragged on all the time, oh, it's too low of a compression engine. It's got a tiny cam. It's got just as much static compression as a LS3 or an LS7 or whatever, because they're all able to run on pump gas or a similar amount. Yes, it probably has slightly less dynamic compression than an LS7. We were able to find the limits of that engine with a stock cam. We started off with the timing table running 93, and then once we found out kind of where the truck was happy, we put 87 in and found out there were only like 2 or 3 boxes that had a degree or 2 of knock retard. So then we took that timing out in those couple boxes, and then we had an engine that was fully maximized for 87, and that's how we do it now, because LQ4s don't need to have premium, even with a lot of timing. We're running a peak of 28 degrees on regular, and of course it ramped up to 28, and different parts of the table have many different timing. So really quickly, just so you guys kind of know a visualization of how that works. If you have gasoline, you dump it on the ground right there, and you put a little bit of gasoline on the ground. The flame front's kind of, lame, right? You light it, and you can just kind of stand here. If you dump a whole puddle of gasoline, you light it, whoosh, and you're going to want to back up because it's going to expand rapidly. The more air and fuel that you have in the motor, the faster engine, the faster that flame front propagates and reaches maximum pressure. All you're doing with tuning the timing table is you're attempting to have the piston come up to top dead center and then begin coming down just slightly at the point where it's ramping up to maximum pressure. If you have maximum pressure when the piston's still coming up, knock, because the piston's trying to come up when the pressure's trying to increase. If the piston is running away from the pressure, so let's just say top dead center, coming down, bang, and then the flame front is chasing the piston, that's how a two-step works. So if you're trying to spool up the turbo, you would have the flame front propagating with the piston being chased down. It's not increasing or it's not making a lot of power, but it's making so there's a huge amount of flame, huge amount of expanding gas when the exhaust valve opens, and then the piston pushes all that spent fuel that's still burning up into the turbo and spools up the turbo. So that's how the two-step works. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that at all points, whether it be idle, part throttle, full throttle, high load part throttle, high load fuel throttle, high RPM at small throttle. For instance, you drive a manual and you're at 6,000 RPM and at like 8th throttle, just running because you're about to stand on it. Or I don't know. You got some reason why you're doing that. The engine's got to be able to run properly at those RPMs. So the timing table is a very diverse table that, like, for instance, on a 6.0 tune, might be anything between, 21 degrees before top dead center to 48 or something like that. And 48 would be an engine at idle or at part throttle, where it takes a really long time for that flame front to reach its maximum expanded value. So the piston's coming up, and say you light it about right there, bang, goes to the top, and then it expands because it takes so long for that to happen. And then you have a smooth running engine at idle. When you have older engines that have distributors and they don't have electronic ignition control, you're very limited on what you can set idle to because they only advance so much, and then you have vacuum advance that advances it further. So you get that 35, 45 degrees of vacuum advance for cruising, but you'd get that with a keystroke on a EFI computer. But then in order to have your peak, your maximum timing advance, let's say you're shooting for, 32, 34, something like that in a small block Chevy, something like that. Usually they really like that 38, 37, 36, something like that. In order to have that, you need to have the idle set at usually 7 degrees of idle advance, which may not be the most ideal idle advance for that engine. Where if you had EFI and you could individually tune each cell for all the different loads on the engine, all the different engine RPMs, you would be able to have a very precise control of your timing table and put exactly the amount of timing that the engine wants, as opposed to the limitation that the mechanical systems are able to give. So I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. We talked a lot about spark too, because the thing is that fueling is very closely tied to spark, and it's a balancing act between the two to get the most optimum performance out of your engine. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And like I said, if you guys ever want to see, or if you guys would like to see more of that happening on the channel, more tuning, more older trucks getting used, tuned, carbureted setups, whatever, let me know what you want to see, because I don't make a lot from YouTube, certainly not enough to justify a huge amount of expense, going toward it, but I don't mind investing some into the YouTube channel to make more diversified content. And I think that off-roading is something that definitely should be on the channel more, because I'm unwilling to beat on my nice truck that I'm really trying to keep nice. All the years of beating on my trucks and having Michigan pinstripes down them, I really would like to avoid Michigan pinstripes in my beautiful silver truck. So I definitely have project vehicles that I could get done, but in the meantime, if there was a lot of interest in seeing, tuning and off-roading, then that tells me what vehicle I need to get to do two things, kill two birds with one stone. So let me know what you guys want to see. I really appreciate my consistent viewers. I've noticed you stick around for all types of different content types on my channel. I really appreciate that. So thank you to all of you guys. And as the channel grows and as there's more diversified viewers, now some of you guys may only want to see stuff on the Super Duty. Maybe you only want to see stuff on the Expedition. Maybe you only want to see tractor stuff. Maybe you only want to see deer hunting and food plotting, tractor use. Oh, there's a little buck right there. Look at that. Look at him. Look at how cute he is. Oh, look at the little guy. Oh, so cute. Welcome, buddy. Eat as you wish. If you would like to see, some people would like to see just the content that they want to see. Other people seem to want to stick around for other types of content and maybe learn something, or maybe just experience something different. I know that that's how I generally do YouTube, is I get on YouTube and I watch all kinds of myriad of stuff, and I learn stuff along the way. I watch things that I didn't know before, and expands my mind and makes me ask questions. And then sometimes I want to experience the questions that I'm asking myself. So he just ran back in. What a cute little guy. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We had a nice little photo bomb by probably a little 4-point. He might be a 6-point, who knows? A little 4-point, a little 6-point. Came out and say hi. So I'm happy to see him. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing him. Take care all. Have a great day. Turn around and get in the truck, and there's more deer right there. They must have been all out there eating while I was filming. Isn't that crazy? Gotta love watching deer. All right, I'll take care and have a great day.